Has the all-encompassing enthusiasm and bold ambition of the early years of Alf Cannan's administration finally been smothered by the inhospitable atmosphere of consensus politics? Is our current system capable of delivering a bold and ambitious vision for the island? And how do we assess our MHK's ability when manifestos appear so light on policy commitments? Agenda's back after its 6-week summer recess, and Alistair Ramsay joins me in the studio to help answer these questions. You've blogged recently about the position of Isle of Man government with their economic strategy, and you've also mentioned there the Isle of Man government conference. Well, perhaps if we start with the conference. What was your overall take from that conference?
Yeah, so I was at the conference off and on the other week, and the thing that really struck me, this is the last conference of the Cannan administration, was how different it was from the first one back in 2022, which I also attended. And that was a really big kind of, I described it as boosterish, rallies in favour of the new economic strategy. There was proclaiming these great targets of 100,000 population, 5,000 new jobs. And at the most recent conference, so that first conference was really an open door, open wallet approach. They were going to fund all this infrastructure and so on. The most recent conference, complete reversal of that. There was an emphasis on tighter immigration, tighter border security, government efficiency, spending less. And most important of all, it was mentioned that around the advent of AI, alongside the announcement of an office for AI, the Chief Minister said that they would be reviewing or refreshing, I think was the expression he used, the economic strategy. And when you think about it, in the face of AI, which is threatening to remove a lot of jobs, having an economic policy based on growing the working population is really not tenable. So my blog was basically saying that the long-term economic strategy, which was supposed to last 15 years, has lasted 3 years.
And I guess if there was a government minister here, they might argue that, well, OK, there's a few tweaks to the economic policy, but fundamentally it hasn't significantly changed. Yes, they're aware now because of rather unfortunate events that took place of the need for a strengthening of our immigration policy and controls over who can come and live and work on the Isle of Man. But beyond that, they're still open for business. They still want the people to come. They will point to fairly tenuous progress in that direction, that there are new people coming to live and work on the island.
Yes, but I mean, it really was a wide open door in those early days with the blessing of the government and certainly the Department for Enterprise, which at one stage wanted to get rid of the work permit system. They really were going in the other direction, and now they're reaping the consequences of, this rather unsophisticated approach to growing the population. And it really is my point, and I'm not an expert in AI, but I would have thought that economic experts would have been able to see this phenomena on the horizon, that they would have taken that into account, because it was just about on the horizon when they finalised this document.
I suppose this moves us on to the question that I suppose everyone will have to answer in the course of the next 12 months. Well, it's less than 12 months now, isn't it, until the general election. How do we assess the capability of MHKs to carry on in their roles, particularly at a time when it would appear that you can have these it's consensus politics is basically the system that functions in the Isle of Man. So you get a consensus that agrees one thing, which may well have been where we were 4 years ago. then that consensus gradually shifts over the period of the 3 or 4 years that have intervened, and the consensus has moved. And I suppose that's democracy, isn't it? Our members are elected, many on relatively light manifestos when it comes to policy commitments, but they are elected. They're elected by the people to make decisions on our behalf. And if their decision is actually, that rather bold and ambitious policy that we had 3 or 4 years ago, we think maybe we need to row back a bit on that. Surely that's democracy.
It is. I think the lack of collective accountability is one of the fundamental weaknesses of our system. And I know other people have been talking about this recently, where when the members at the end of the 5 years, when they face the public again, on the national issues, constituency issues, they've worked hard and they've done stuff for their constituents, but on the national issues, it's very hard to pin anyone down. It's very hard to actually get any ownership of what's happened over the last 5 years. I wasn't involved in that. I didn't like that. It was my colleagues who pushed that one. It was the civil servants who blocked that one. Plus the fact that at the beginning of the 5 years, of course, they haven't got a strong or clear national policy mandate in the first place for which you could judge them against. So it's like appointing somebody to a job and you're not really sure what job you want them to do. And then at the end of the term of office, how do what was it you were supposed to be doing? Well, I can tell you what I was doing, but I don't really know.
I suppose then you're kind of posing this question, aren't you? Do you think the public actually understands what it is that MHKs do?
No, I think people struggle with that anywhere because they haven't got a lot of time to take in the detail of politics. I think it's harder here because of the nature of our politics, which is basically a football match with one team on the pitch. And some of the people are kind of in the team, but they're not. Where you've got a kind of more oppositional politics, that is easier to understand because it throws up particular questions and controversies. A lot of the real political questions in the Isle of Man tend to be hidden, and they're kind of debated behind closed doors in the Council of Ministers.
And having been in the Council of Ministers often, I have felt that that's probably the best place for those sorts of decisions because ultimately, as a politician, what you should be doing is making difficult choices. If the Isle of Man is to continue to prosper in a relatively uncertain world on many fronts, tough decisions will need to be taken along the way. It's not just a case of I'm going to vote for this because that's a nice new shiny thing in my constituency, or there's a wonderful opportunity there to mean that nobody has to pay for their prescriptions anymore, or whatever it may be. The obvious vote winners don't necessarily allow for the continuation of government on the Isle of Man and the provision of the services that we all need.
Yes, and no, I mean you do have to make tough decisions, but I mean that would be within, I think, a policy framework where you've at least got some mandate for an overall direction. I don't think you would have a very detailed mandate. I don't really know what the solution is, but I think we do need our elections to be national elections and not a series of local popularity contests.
And yet every opinion poll exit poll that Manx Radio's done for general elections, the overwhelming reason why people vote was local issues.
Yeah.
Which perhaps suggests that the public are more interested in what's happening in their local area than they are about the the finances of Isle of Man government and whether we're able to stay afloat.
I'm sure the local issues are a lot more immediate and relevant to them and they can understand them. I would say that the national picture hasn't really been presented to them in a clear and relevant way, because that's down to the candidates to start talking more about that. I know some of them do and make an effort, but I guess, and I wonder now if that's going to shift with the changing society here, whether there will be more of a national focus, whether this time round there will be more of a kind of anti-government reaction.
Yes, and I suppose there have been many anti-government reactions. I mean, certainly all the governments I served in were described at one point or another as the worst government we've ever had.
They've all been.
And the last two have been even worse, apparently.
Yes.
And that can't be the case. That can't be true. Although I suppose that certainly the last 5 administrations have had the unfortunate problem of not having endless supplies of cash, and the only problem was what will we spend it on. That changed with the alteration to the VAT sharing arrangement, and as a consequence, the tough decisions have kind of needed to be made, but have they been made? And have where are we in terms of the big issues? So, for example, taxation system, a fairer taxation system was described as one of the Treasury Minister's core policies. Do you think we're any closer to understanding what that looks like?
No, I mean my perception from a distance is that part of the problem with this administration and why it's been so dysfunctional, I think, is that it's a coalition of opposites. That you've got a Treasury Minister and a Chief Minister who are pulling in apparently in opposite directions, like a pantomime horse with two heads, I suppose.
And hasn't that always been the case? I mean, you've had quite strident and opposing views in Council of Ministers in the past, but that didn't necessarily result in the sorts of division that apparently seems to be prevalent in...
No, I think maybe it's more marked this time, but it's noticeable that the Treasury Minister, I think he's been frustrated that he hasn't been able to do what he really wanted to do. When he has been allowed to do it, he's obviously out on his own over the health levy. No other minister, as far as I'm aware, ever spoke in favour of it. There was no indication that was actually government policy, which was really odd, actually, something that significant. So that issue about, for example, the health service, is it overspending or is it underfunded, is a fundamental one, and that needs to be at the centre of the election.
And of course, the other big DHSC-related issue was the paying for residential care. There had been talk in the early stages of this government that maybe some sort of solution would be found whereby people who had property, had wealth of some kind, would keep more of that as a result of a new scheme that would be introduced. But that's...
Well, there was a consultation, wasn't there? Would you like the government to pay all your care costs in your old age? And surprisingly, the answer was yes, please, I think. But that was a totally, as far as I could see, an unfunded exercise. And it's almost as if the financial and fiscal reality has only really dawned on them about halfway through the administration.
Again, my role, I suppose, as presenter here is to try and be as fair as I can be. Government was right in that it suggests that the only way we are going to deliver the quality and standard of service that the public appears to want is if we can grow the economic output of the Isle of Man, and to do that you need more jobs and you need more businesses to relocate to the island, and as a result the tax take will increase, which will then mean we can afford to pay for all this.
Yes, I mean, and growing the working population has been an aim for as long as I can remember. and addressing that kind of age imbalance in the population. But I think what a number of people have said is that in the past you went for the business and the economic activity, and the people would follow that. A kind of people first strategy was quite unusual, and yet it was swallowed whole by Tymble without much challenge or questioning at all, which again to me is another of the weaknesses we have, where some really big decisions, Tymble hasn't done its job as an independent parliament and challenged this and asked questions.
And then of course your particular favourite, for which you were challenged certainly by many of the Tymble members, was the secret government briefings. Yes. And of course that is the time where you as an MHK, you have the opportunity behind closed doors to say what you really think of certain government policies. And that tends, during my time I felt this was the case, and certainly there's no indication that it's changed. That tended to be where the main debate took place, was the secret or the confidential briefing.
The closed briefings, because some information is now released
and
later on.
then you thought, well, I've said all I need to say. Government knows what I think, so I don't really need to say it again when it comes to the public bit. Missing, of course, the point that actually the public are the people who put you there in the first place.
That's a terribly unhealthy process. I'm not sure how much of that still goes on. I imagine some of it does. But basically, it is part of the consideration by Parliament of issues of policy and legislation. And I would have thought that process should, wherever possible, be a public one. I think the briefings are useful, but they should be open to the public in some way, accepting that in very special circumstances, issues of national urgency or whatever, you may have a closed briefing. But the culture which gathers everyone in a room just reinforces the kind of one-party state feel of it, that you're all insiders, and I think it compromises the integrity of the members as independent parliamentarians. But I'm a bit of a voice in the wilderness on that one.
One of the things the Chief Minister was very keen to point out was the relative stability in the Isle of Man compared with other neighbouring democracies. Certainly in Ireland we have this kind of situation where there's a shared power of the parties that are trying to keep Sinn Féin out of power in the Republic of Ireland. In UK, the Labour Party won a landslide victory last year, but with less votes than Jeremy Corbyn got in the election before that, which maybe suggests that the landslide wasn't as big as you might think. What Alf Cannan, I think, reasonably says is that at least in the Isle of Man we have a relatively stable political atmosphere.
Yeah, but I mean, actually, this last administration has been more unstable in terms of the political turmoil. This Chief Minister was the first one ever, I think, to face a vote of no confidence. Ministers have been coming and going, revolving doors. Senior civil servants have been coming and going. For periods you wonder who's on the bridge of the ship. So I wouldn't say by Manx standards that it has been stable at all, although they have had quite an impressive looking and very professional island plan behind it. But I'm not sure. But the political behaviour hasn't matched the order and the logic of that plan, really.
But isn't, and again, on the one, having experienced how fickle public opinion can be, public opinion tends to suggest that what we need is powerful political leaders who are quick to recognise when someone isn't doing a particularly good job, move them out, get someone else in who can do a better job. And potentially, that's what happened in relation to the senior civil servants that all seem to have a sudden desire to spend more time in their gardens at an early stage of this administration. Yeah. Maybe the Chief Minister was doing the bidding of the public and saying, actually, you know what, you've not delivered. We need someone
Yeah,
new
and I think the public would approve of quite a lot of that, and I think that sometimes ministers need to go, but I think it just became a kind of a modus operandi for a while. I think it's stopped now, and I'm not quite sure what was behind it. But,
Yes, and as I say, my job is to ask the questions and try and keep the thing reasonably balanced. I'm not sure we're helping the listener though in terms of saying how do you actually assess your MHK when it comes to election time? How do you mark their card? And well, I suppose maybe the best way we could do that is how do you do that personally in terms of your constituents, MHKs?
Yeah, it is tricky. I mean, obviously there's a constituency, your experience, if any, of them as a constituency representative, then you'll be aware vaguely of those points where they, are involved in debates and they get their name in the papers or whatever. It is hard to judge, and I think there is a danger at the next election that if there is an anti-government reaction, that we throw the baby out with the bathwater, and there are quite a few members there who actually are pretty intelligent, pretty hard-working, have got really good potential. One of the big problems has been the lack of experience, and I think if anything, people have been guilty of, with their lack of experience, just going along with stuff that perhaps they shouldn't. And I think there's a danger if they all get kicked out, you're back to square one, and you've got an equally inexperienced House that could actually be worse.
Yeah. So
I would say, with some members, they need a second chance. I don't think this House has covered itself with glory, but individually there are some good people there.
Mm-hmm. And you made the point there about experience. Do you think that the days where you could have MHKs who were representing their constituencies for 30, 40 years, those days are numbered, possibly as a result of the way in which social media is far more intrusive into understanding what MHKs are up to and what they do?
Yeah. I guess the whole atmosphere is less settled than it was. It makes it more volatile and kind of febrile, doesn't it? Whether that will have an effect on the longevity of people's service, it's probably a harder job to do, just because of the kind of personalised abuse that comes into your own home via your own phone. That didn't happen in the past. So yeah, and maybe people will be less inclined to do long service because of that.
And let's perhaps consider finally the suggestion, which I've heard a few people mention in the last week or so, that yes, but I'm just one of 24 members. What can I do? I tried to do this, but I was unable to because the other members weren't persuaded by my eloquent arguments. To my mind, that says actually your eloquent arguments weren't eloquent enough, because what I'm voting an MHK in to do is to be a really good debater and influencer. And if you are both of those things, you can get quite a lot done.
Yeah, I think that tends to be a bit of a cop-out, really. And I think maybe in future, where members have shared interests and shared priorities, this may be the way forward. Instead of actually having rigid, formal party politics, maybe you have elements of a common manifesto or a shared platform that the members who believe in X, Y, and Z all put that in the same form of words on their manifestos, so that you then got a bit of a wedge on that particular issue.
And of course, as journalists, presenters, part of our role is to try and pick through the defence of prospective candidates who are trying to be all things to all people, because that's the best way, or has formerly anyway been the best way to get elected, because if you declare pin your colours to a right of centre mast, then the chances are the left of centre people will vote for someone else, and vice versa. Using comparisons with UK politics is now even less meaningful than perhaps it was in the past, when at least there were two clear and distinct views in Labour and Conservative politics.
Yeah, and I think there's a number of different spectrums that kind of go through politics here that you can try and position people on. And as you say, people don't like to be pinned down too much because they don't like to alienate people. And the excuse in the past was, well, I won't know till I get in there. That's less of an excuse now, because there really is a lot of information online, and candidates should have done their homework at least and have some ideas. You don't expect all the answers from them in detail, but some ideas of where they would like to see the island going. And
have you decided yet whether your MHKs, your existing MHKs, are worthy of a vote next time?
I haven't decided that yet. And again, it depends on what the alternatives are. Be careful what you wish for sometimes.
That was political commentator Alistair Ramsay. So what do you think? Have you made your mind up yet about your constituency MHKs? Is lack of experience in keys part of the problem? And if it is, how will voting out the old MHKs and in the newbies actually help? Don't forget, this programme is available as a podcast on Max Radio's website. For now, I'm Phil Gaughan. Goramayo. Thanks for listening.